give a big round of applause. These portable microphones, please bring the portable microphones. Shall I start? Professor Tawfiq, shall we? Good afternoon, everybody. Well, my name is Salahuddin Amin Zaman. I'm an advisor of the South Asian Institute of Policy and Governance in this institute, and I'll be the moderator of this session. And Professor Tawfiq has given an attribute to me, and that is I'm a good time master. Well, that's how it should be done because all this logistic is available there. So, as you know, that exactly we have a very important session, this one, because we have a galaxy of parts around. So, before I start, let me request our panelists to introduce themselves very briefly. Could you?
Good afternoon, I welcome you back.
Good morning, Dr. K. Gowrie. I am Chief Publisher.
My name is Salahuddin Amin Zaman, as I said. Honorable.
My name is Sheikh Haq, I work for the government.
My name is Hamid Alba. I work for myself.
Hello.
I'm Alistair Bolton of the UNHCR Regional Office in Bangkok.
Good afternoon, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Salim Al-Haq. I'm Director of the International Center for Sustainability and Development at the Independent University of Bangladesh, next door to Mombasa.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Nitin Pawkikin. I'm a Burmese American. I currently teach in India at the Global University as Associate Professor, Assistant Dean, and Executive Director for Center for Southeast Asian Studies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, let me just set the context of this panel discussion that we have this morning, this afternoon. The first of all is that we are very well aware that 85 you use the reference from UNHCR. At this point of time, all over the world, we have about 25.9 million of refugees. No, it's something wrong somewhere. 29.5 million refugees around the world. So that is a very alarming number. And we also learned from UNHCR that nearly 1% is forcibly displaced every 2 seconds as a result of conflict, persecution in the world. So that's the alarming figure. And at this point of time, until March 2019, is July, so we have about almost 1 million stateless people from Rohingya. People are here and concentrated in Bukhia and Technology. So now the fact is that refugees, they're human beings, and they need care, they need attention, and in a civilized world, they deserve basic human treatment with appropriate level of human get acquainted with our panelists. Now, as you know that we had a keynote speaker and no less than Tansri Syed Hamid Arulbar. Now, I think we are passionately listening to his presentation, and if you permit me, Dr. Albar, I have drawn 9 points from your presentation, and I may not have touched some of those, but broadly 9 points. That perhaps would help us to understand the context. What he has argued, if I may quote him, he says, we have understood the symptoms of Rohingya crisis, but substantive and sustainable solutions are not in the horizon. That's the first point emerged. Second, we need to understand the concern of the Rohingya people as regards security and overall politics on Rohingya crisis. The second argument he made, observation. Third observation was, we need an international narrative than Myanmar narrative. Fourth, he also found that sustainable solution would depend on, I quote and unquote him, a proper understanding of the root causes. Fifth, he observed that solution lies in the realistic, quote unquote, honest and truthful understanding of the issue. Sixth, Dr. Albar again argues that there is a space for the regional actors and also the global powers to devise a sustainable solution. Seventh, there is also a potential of forming a joint working group to negotiate with China and other key stakeholders. And eighth point that I have observed from his presentation is that collective initiative of ASEAN and even could possibly be an option. And finally, what I got from him, that he also mentioned that we should really explore the potential of implementing Kofi Annan report. And in his point of view, this was being carried forward further by our advisor to the Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. H.T. Mam. He also emphasized the need for unfolding the 5 points propositions being made by Honorable Prime Minister in the UN sessions. So this is the context. Now, having the context here, now we have panelists. So we would request our panelists, starting from the left, maybe, that, all right, this is the context. Now we are looking for a sustainable solution of the problem. So from your expertise, experience, and your professional background, what are your views and take given the context of a sustainable solution? And let me remind the audience that Honorable Secretary, Foreign Secretary, has said that he will listen all of this, including the questions, and then he will take the floor. All right. So shall I start with Mr. Marshall?
Thank you. This is really a $1 million, maybe 20 years question, which I don't, which I don't have an answer to. Really, I'm being very honest. I can tell that how things can go sour from here. Like what is the solution? I don't know, but what is not the solution, that I can probably share a few points. One is, even if we talk about 200 people a day repatriation, considering the population growth in the camp, we are actually looking at more than 20 years of time for repatriation of the entire population. So 200 people a day, 1,000 people a week, 52 weeks is roughly. So that needs to be somehow, factored in. So we probably need to prepare ourselves to be able to, address this in a timely fashion. It cannot be done quickly, and the confusion that whether this entire population can live within 2 years or 20 years, I think is creating a, uncertainty in the mind of Rohingyas, in the mind of respondent, and it creates a uncertainty among the people. So this is one thing, uncertainty and hopelessness, that can make the situation sour. My first point. Second point is uh, not that the Rohingyas are not fleeing the camp. There are media reports of 200 people per day fleeing the camp. Why people are staying? Those who are staying, because that's the best option. The food is available, treatment is available, and so on and so forth. So they cannot get a better livelihood by leaving the camp. This can change if the international attention to this crisis goes away. Currently, we have I don't know, 35-40% of the GRP funded. If it next year, if it is less, the funding, lack of the care can hamper the hopefulness, if you may, or can make alternative livelihood more attractive, which may drive some of the Rohingyas or make it more lucrative for Rohingyas to try and go out of the camp. And if that happens, then the able-bodied men will go out first. The Rohingya camp will then become a old home, and that's dangerous. Old home and old and young woman home, that would be dangerous for that context. The third thing is uh, their ability to work. Work is not about money alone. Work is about self-worth. Work is about whether they can, live for tomorrow, whether they look forward to something going forward. If that is not allowed, now I'm not saying that we just give them work willy-nilly and so I'm not talking about what is sustainable in the long term. I'm saying if we don't do it, then it becomes unsustainable. If they can't work, if they don't have tomorrow to look forward to, then there is every possibility that it can become sour. It can become, that we have seen in many refugee conditions context globally. So, so that doesn't happen, we probably need to find a way to get these people looking forward to something for tomorrow, create self-worth, get engaged into something which is meaningful. So these are the 3 points that I think engagement. So if this 3 doesn't happen, I'm afraid that there can be elements, anti-social elements, anti-state elements who can use this community, take advantage of their hopelessness, their lack of direction, their lack of tomorrow, and get them involved into activities which we don't want. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's definitely, I would say, even more than $1 million question. It's at least a $5 billion question, and that's just so far. So after the Second World War, with the emergence of the Marshall Plan and different structured loans and money flowing into post-World War Europe, we saw a lot of development and progression towards good governance and respect of human rights. And this was one of the elements that led development practitioners to a conclusion that money can lead to respect of human rights. In other words, if there's a problem and you throw enough money at it, that will resolve the problem. I think we have many examples around the world that clearly demonstrate this is not the case. I think it is also the case we're dealing with now. Some of you may be familiar with the so-called Rosenthal report, which looked at where did it go wrong for the UN and some other key players in Myanmar in terms of the recent crisis. So to understand what to do in the future, looking forward, we have to look back and we have to understand the history and we have to know the history of the Rohingyas very well. We specifically have to know very well specifically the first influx, the second influx, the reasons behind it, and the root causes of this crisis. Our aim is not just the return of Rohingyas, it's the dignified and sustainable return. We want them to return and live and thrive in their homeland, and not to be back here in 5 or 10 years from now. So that if we learn anything from history, I think this is one of the lessons we have to take on board. So one element that I would really like to highlight is, do we have the right approach when we're discussing this issue? Is it a matter of throwing more money in development projects? Will that address the root causes of this displacement and of this conflict on the other side? And I think it is instructive to look at also naturally the Rakhine Commission, the Rosenthal report, and let's look at the mistakes we made as the international community. Let's talk about what could have been done differently from our side, and then structure our support. But ultimately, there can only be one solution to this crisis. The problem can only be solved where it started, and the only outcome of this can be the return of Rohingyas to their homeland. Thank you.
Now, you did mention about the sustainable return. Yeah, can you just further clarify that? Sustainable return. Now, you just mentioned about sustainable return. Could you just further clarify what it is and what it means actually? What are the components and process that comes out of it?
Well, by sustainable return, we simply mean that the Rohingyas are able to return to their homeland or a place of their choosing, and be able to stay there and continue to live with the respect of their fundamental rights. So if you look at the requests that the Rohingya community leaders have made, the conditions that have to be met before they even consider return, this is a clear reflection of what I'm talking about. Access to citizenship, pathway to a normal, thriving life, and exercise of the rights that they have.
Thank you very much. Now, shall we go to our next speaker, who is going to offer? I mean,
Very good, thanks. I don't, in my view, and speak on behalf of UNHCR, I don't think the articulation of solutions to the situation is that difficult. It's the implementation. The solutions look like, sound like, something that the speaker set out this morning, and it was recapitulated at the beginning of this session. Or, in the language of UNHCR, it's initiative called the Solidarity Group, or in the language of all the countries in the world that join hands in the Global Compact on Refugees. It's those four elements. It's easing the pressure on Bangladesh. It's creating the conditions for sustainable return in Myanmar, which means respect for fundamental rights, the implementation of the Rakhine Advisory Commission report, progress under the MOU. It's a matter of political will and really addressing things. Thirdly, it's increasing the opportunities for Rohingya to pursue other solutions, other third country solutions. Again, like links to the easing the burden on Bangladesh. And it's about self-reliance, right? So that people are better equipped when they do go home, as the principal solution, to look after themselves. So I don't think there's anything mysterious about what needs to happen. The difficulty is making it happen. The voluntary return that's been agreed to by Bangladesh and Myanmar should be completed by the end of the year, and that's clearly not going to happen. But why is that not happening? Myanmar points the finger at Bangladesh and says they're holding the Rohingyas hostage and holding them back. That's clearly not the case. The refugees tell us and tell anybody who will listen that they want to go back, but they're afraid to because the security guarantees aren't there, and the the things to which they're entitled, like the homes, if they have not been raised, and basic human rights are not guaranteed. So that's where I would leave it. That we know what to do. It's a question of getting it done, and I think fresh ideas are needed there. But the essence of the problem is known to us, and it hasn't changed.
Thank you very much. Let me give you a little bit of where I'm coming from before I give you my analysis of what we need to be thinking about in this context. So I'm an environmental specialist, and I work particularly on climate change. Neither of these are primary issues with regard to the political context in which we are looking at the Rohingya situation in the Cox's Bazar region of Bangladesh. But they are relevant, and they will become even more relevant as we go forward in two senses. Firstly, the area that the Rohingya refugees are in is one of our most pristine environmental forest areas. That used to be a pristine forest. 2 years ago, if you look at a satellite image of that area, it was a pristine forest with wild elephants going up and down. We have now put almost 1 million people in one of the biggest, if not the biggest, refugee camp in the middle of that wild elephant path. Initially, some of the wild elephants actually trampled some of the people, but we have successfully managed to get the elephants to go around the camp now. It's been an interesting experiment to do that. And we now have a huge number of Rohingya refugees living there. In another piece of information to share with you is that in Bangladesh now, we all know Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries to the impacts of climate change. There was a study done about a year ago by the government of Bangladesh with support from the German government to identify the most vulnerable parts of Bangladesh. And they came up with a list of about 5 regions: the coastal region, the flood-prone region, the Hawar region, the Barind, etc. The Cox's Bazar region was not on that list. But if you were to do that analysis again today, I think Cox's Bazar would be number 2 on the list just after the coastal area because of the influx of the refugees. And so going forward now, in terms of developing Bangladesh as a national strategy for dealing with the impacts of climate change, the region of Cox's Bazar is now a priority region for us to consider, both for the host population as well as the Rohingya population, whether they stay or they don't stay, and definitely for the environment around the population that is there. So there is now, going forward, a very, I would say, much higher priority for environmental factors to be taken into account, which weren't earlier. Earlier it was a humanitarian issue. You know, we cut the trees and put them up because we had to do it. But right now we need to take the environmental factors back into consideration and think about how we include them in whatever we plan to do going forward. So I would argue for whatever the government and the agencies involved are thinking about going forward, we do need to think about the environmental issues much, much more seriously than we did before. Thank you.
Yes, please.
It is always difficult to speak as an academic, but I would like to be realistic here, and I would like to bring a different perspective than any other speakers on the panel. Because I was born in Myanmar, so I know pretty much about the perspective of the Myanmar people and its government. Let me start off with the 1978 and 79 exodus of this Rohingya population. That was the first wave, major wave of exodus. Then we saw 1991, 92. Then again, 16, 17. It's been about that major exodus of this population. And today we hear from the UN estimates that there are over 1 million Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh. And now I'm going to give 3 possible avenues or solutions that we should explore. This is purely based on the paper I presented just before this panel. I was presenting a paper on Myanmar perspective on the Rohingya crisis. And I have 3 things. The first one, I still believe that it is the responsibility of Myanmar, its military leadership, the civilian leadership, and the general public to embrace and welcome, accommodate these Rohingyas back to the country. And I think if this happens, this would be the best possible solution to the Rohingya crisis. But at the same time, I'm not very optimistic about this happening. Why? I have already mentioned 3 stages or 3 major exoduses. Then here is the second component. And a few years ago, in fact 2 years ago, the then UNHCR chief, now who is the President Secretary General of United Nations, in response to the Burmese President Thein Sein, he said, Rohingyas are not eligible for resettlement because they do not fit into the definition of refugees which are to be resettled at that country. But I think after this a couple of years, what has happened? I think the international community should explore an option for a third country resettlement as well, as one option. And the third avenue that we should also explore, I don't think this is something that would be appreciated by the crowd here, but let me be very frank here. According to UNHCR policy, they have 3 different what we call policies or programs that they implement toward a long-term solution to refugee crisis. One is resettlement, repatriation. The third one is local integration. And I don't know whether every one of us who are gathered here today believe that over 1 million population or refugees would really be going back to Burma. So is there a possibility we should explore maybe some kind of local integration as well? I know this may not be a good taste to many of you here, but I'm not saying that either of these 3 should be exclusively pursued. What I rather suggest is that maybe we should have a comprehensive strategy looking at the possibility of these possible avenues or solutions that can bring a long-term solution to the Rohingya crisis. And I know it's hard and it's sensitive, and of course it's controversial, but I think as academic, this is what I see. In fact, I just published an article in London by Journal of Muslim Minority Affairs. The title is The Rohingya Crisis, the Centrality of Identity and Citizenship. And right now, I do not see, of course, as we speak, there are Burmese ministers coming and visiting Cox's Bazar. I do not see a serious political will from the Myanmar leadership to bring these people back to the country. Maybe they would bring some, but not all of them. That's according to my very honest academic analysis.
Now, Shli, once you're done, I'll do summary of it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think we have got a very interesting and varied views, but we have not focused on the solution. Actually, we have, even though we see there is a solution, I think very important for us to look at the issue. One is whether all that we are suggesting, methodology, the approach, whether it is pragmatic or not. One, if it is not pragmatic, what is doable? I think you have come up with one suggestion, doable, in our colleagues' view. The doable thing is for local integration. Of course, there is the simplest method to absorb. But I'm worried if this be the approach that any government takes or any other ASEAN country takes. ASEAN is a very multicultural, very diversified country. Then there will be other crises where we will be pushing our people out and they will land in another country and we say let them be integrated. So I'm a bit concerned about that. And I think that also will take us away from accountability and responsibility. And that is an important issue. And I know that I think Myanmar will not implement the agreement between Myanmar and Bangladesh. That's my view. I may be totally wrong because they feel this is a good way out. The best thing is to drag the issue for a long time until it is not given attention to, and Bangladesh will be the sufferer. So I think another important issue that you have brought up is the political will. I spoke to the president of the interfaith in Myanmar. And I met him and had a discussion. He said to me, these people are not our people. If you're so interested on them, why don't you take them? And if you're so interested, we have got a country that has offered to resettle them. Gambia wants to the president of Gambia comes, sometimes he come up with fantastic approach about quick solution. So I said, Excellency, revered, monk, I think you see that they are not from here. Let us look at the geography and history of the world. History of the world has been new geographies are created. New movement of people are created. If you say they are not from here, they are all along the borders. You live along the borders, you tend to look alike, Sometimes I'm mistaken for a Pakistani, sometimes I'm mistaken for Bangladeshi, sometimes I'm mistaken for an Arab. But that's the nature of human being. We all originate from Adam and Eve. So, but if he says, you say Rohingya are not from here. Okay, assuming that I take their view. Definitely they have been in this part of the world for hundreds of years, for centuries. So you have no, and even in your case, I mean, sorry to say, because you are from, you're Chin, isn't it? So even the Burman, they do not come from Burma. They are from the plain of Tibet and Bhutan. So all of us move. And there are so many, so I think it is, in my view, no matter how difficult it is, we must settle them back to Myanmar. Because otherwise, you have got, I think 2 years was a very impractical solution, sorry to say, because Myanmar, I think based on experience in dealing with them, they mentioned, I was told that, they said, I said, you have to get rid of all in order for you to bring back. You have to get rid of the hate speeches, the violent narrative, saying all these things, and then you cannot burn house of prayers of these people. It will, but they say that they believe that they can do it by taking slow process, step-by-step process. And this, don't forget, the solution to me, because of the time factor, to me, the solution lies not only with the United Nations, because there is a selective or differential treatment on tackling the issue of Rohingya. Why I say that, this is where it is proven, and we have seen that in South Asia, we had one genocide in Cambodia. 2 million people were just killed. It took a long time to resolve it. And now we have another evidence of genocide. If we do not take action, say it's all right, you move to Malaysia, and I think one of my Indonesian, I was talking to one of the ministers, I cannot quote his name because otherwise he will get into trouble. In Myanmar, I said, why has it reached this extent? His argument is that, he says, I know that these people are not foreigners. They are part of the Rakhine state. But it is a political issue that we cannot find a way to resolve. So I think I like to, as human beings, I like to conclude by saying that there must be an immediate scheme, and we must divide it into strategic plan. Easier for us to say, Myanmar must accept. You must have an immediate. Immediately, what can they accept? And then you must have mid-term, and then you have longer term. If you say that immediately 20 years, I think after 20 years, that would be another Palestine. There will be never a resolution to that issue. So let us, I think, human beings, I think the Buddhist, there is a teaching of love, a lot of teaching of love. Let us work on commonality of humanity, not on our differences. Don't be suspicious, don't be prejudiced. Let us try to see that there's enough space in Myanmar. I mean, I'm not saying that if there is no space, I can understand. But there is enough space in Myanmar to accommodate everyone, to accommodate inclusiveness in democracy, human rights, and all sorts. So I think we need to, if there is, but I don't know whether it is practical, I think there is a need for the United Nations to get involved, the international community to get involved, and say that Myanmar has to perform its part. But it may not be practical, but I think that's the only way. Otherwise, you will not have the Rohingya issue resolved, and it will be here for a long, long time. And I think until that issue, when everyone will slowly forget its importance and forget the burden that is being carried by Rohingya, by the Bangladesh government. So thank you. That's a short introduction. Thank you very much.
The Honorable Secretary prefers to use the microphone over there, and we are going to do that.
Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon. The reason I thought that I should take the podium rather than sitting on the chair and speaking to them is to look at your eye and communicate. So that is the precise reason. I really do not know where to start. But let me give you some of the things that I need to say before I speak. I'm a civil servant, so representing the government of Bangladesh. So I will naturally use certain limitations and discretion in terms of saying which I normally say when I'm in one-to-one meetings, either with the Myanmar officials or with the Rohingyas or with the Secretary General. So please forgive me for not being able to be very transparent today. First, there has been a number of concepts used for these displaced people. One is the refugees, the other one is Rohingyas, the third one is forcibly displaced Myanmar national. As far as the government of Bangladesh is concerned, we have debated on this in a cabinet meeting in 2013, and we decided that we will call them forcibly displaced Myanmar nationals or Rohingyas. We do not accept them as refugees, but we loosely use it, and I wouldn't bar people loosely using it, but for the government, that's not what it is. We're talking about sustainable solution. When we talk about sustainable solution, the focus should continue to remain on Rohingyas, not on Bangladesh, not on Myanmar. It should be on Rohingyas. What has happened to them? Why are we talking about a sustainable solution to start with. So what has gone wrong with them? And this is not the first time that we see this is happening to them. This is actually the 5th time. And I have seen the aftermath of atrocities unfolding in front of us. Because on 22nd, 23rd, 24th of August in 2017, we were in the border areas. We have seen houses being burnt on the other side. We have heard people were fired upon and people running for their life. So this is exactly what has happened. You know, with the passage of time, we see there are different narratives being generated by our dear neighbor. So that's where you have to look at. Do not deviate from the focus. There are a couple of issues that I will deal with it. First, with the local integration. Right? And I'm very happy that our distinguished minister from Malaysia, former minister, has rightly pointed out that local integration could be an option, but is it a preferred, morally acceptable option or not? It is certainly not. Where goes the accountability? This is where we possibly has made mistakes in the past. They have came in 78, 79. We thought that we will settle it by returning this 200,000. We did. Then they came again in 92 and 93, and we again thought that we'll be able to solve it. But we almost ignored the whole issue of accountability, the justice, the abuses that have taken place in Myanmar. And the result is that now we are facing a bigger problem. So what is the bigger problem? It is a very complex, fast-changing problem, both for Rohingyas and for Bangladesh. That is why we were so concerned. It's a formidable challenge. We started off things with humanitarian access. People are leaving and they will go back the way it happens in China. So the Prime Minister decided to make this border and welcome them so that they can be looked after him, protected, and then in the appropriate moment we send them back. And that is why in November we went to Myanmar to find a solution to bilateral issues. But look what has happened. All agreed that they have to go back. We were in different countries. And they said, oh, there is a strong political will in Myanmar to take them back. Of course, there is a strong political will in Myanmar. But if you look at the reports, both internationals and some of the report that has recently come out of Australia and Canada, that they are actually buying time. Somebody already did mention. So, under these circumstances, what kind of a solution that we are looking at? And as I said, that we are not looking at local integration. Now, what Bangladesh did in terms of, since it's a policy colloquium, I'll share as to how we gradually upgraded our response, policy response to the issue. First, we thought it's a humanitarian issue. Immediately, we realized after seeing this unfortunate group of people that it's a human rights issue. 1 year into the history, we realize it is a geopolitical issue. So it is a mix of human rights issue, humanitarian issue, and a geopolitical issue. It is indeed taking shape where geopolitics of this region will go through fundamental changes. This is an economic environment I will share with you. Because of the Rohingya crisis, our foreign policy has gone through twists and turns. Things that we are doing now, we have never done in the past. That is what is happening to Bangladesh. It is not only in terms of environment, it is not in terms of burden, but in terms of very nature of the state is going through a change. That's where the solution lies. So this time when we realize that it is a fluid situation, it is a huge atrocity that has taken place. And it reminded us of 1971. I don't know how many of you were born in those days, but I, as a young kid, have seen a pond full of dead bodies. It always reminds me of 1971. That's how I see them, 1971. So I said, we were possibly unfortunate that nobody came forward to look at our genocide. Why not we at least try and get a justice for this group of people if something has gone wrong? So we decided, and our Prime Minister agreed, after long discussions, that we will take it to the international forum, the highest international forum. And that's what she did. In the UNGA, she made a statement that this is ethnic cleansing. We didn't say genocide. We said ethnic cleansing, so keep the response to its limit. And also, 5-point plan, and we try and get support from the multilateral bodies. There wasn't many or much. You know, my IOM colleague has already mentioned that how UN has utterly failed in Myanmar to stop these atrocities. Now there's a report available. You can go and read it, and that things could have been better if UN would have taken precautionary steps. Now, we have not kept our policies only confined into the UN. We realize that possibly Security Council would not be able to have a united voice to bring in a resolution and a punitive action. So when the ICC, International Court of Criminal Court, decided suo motu that they would like to use their jurisdiction, 1903, although Myanmar is not a party, and came to Bangladesh, we had a long debate. You know, I sometimes listen to the talk shop in the television and realize that I wish I could go in public and tell them that what we have been doing for so long, because people think that we are inactive. We are not. So we had a long debate within ourselves. Should we allow ICC to come in and look at these atrocities or not? So finally, the Prime Minister decided, looking at our 71 story, that we will allow ICC to come in. So ICC has already established its jurisdiction. So that is the question of accountability. And it's not easy for a state to allow ICC to come in and look at another neighboring state. Not only that, there was a name of Gambia, rather very loosely, but Gambian government has decided that they will also take Myanmar to the ICJ, to the OIC process. They're bringing a whole lot of a case against the state for committing genocide. As you know, that ICC looks at individuals' international crime, and ICJ looks at states' international crime. So there are multiple ways we are trying to bring a sustainable solution, because that's how I think state of Myanmar would realize that they cannot get away doing this again, again, and again. Now, there was some pessimists. There will always be pessimists in the world. I'm born optimist, but not unrealistic optimism. As the Honorable Minister rightly pointed out, very pragmatic way of addressing it. We know that this burden will be with us for a while. And we will gladly take care of that burden. But by doing it, we will also establish a new name for Bangladesh. That Bangladesh doesn't shy away when it comes to international peace, justice, and accountability issues. That is very fundamental in our foreign policy. In terms of impacts, I'll be very happy to answer your questions. In terms of impact, the impact has been very fundamental, whether in the economy, whether in the socio-cultural matrix of that area, or our foreign policy, or climate change. We'll have to bear it. And as a nation, I think we can do that, because nobody else did it for us in 1971. I wish some countries stood up and said that, you know, something has gone fundamentally wrong in the then East Pakistan, in Bangladesh. people need to look at it. Nobody did. So at least we should not shy away from doing it. In our international relations, in the foreign policy making, when we cannot describe a situation, we say it's a fluid. The Myanmar, Bangladesh, Rohingya issue is a fluid situation. And dealing with the fluid situation is extremely challenging and difficult. And that is why sometimes we cannot answer to your questions, because by answering your questions, we don't want to reveal what strategy that we'll be taking in the next UNGA, or for that matter when ICC really takes up the case and establish an office in Bangladesh. But I can assure you, especially my younger colleagues, that government of Bangladesh, under the leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, has been very proactive in this area. We have done things which many states would have shied away. If there are questions, I'll be very happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Secretary. Now, we have, the floor is open. You can ask a question. Please let us know exactly for whom this question is specifically, so that that particular respondent can come up forward very precise to answer that you expect. The floor is open, and we'll continue, say maybe about 15, 20 minutes for that, and then we'll wind up. Yes, let us take from front, and I'll come back to you. Please kindly introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. I am Mr. President, former ambassador from the British China, and now chairman of the IISS. My question is general, but I think maybe for people, or Mr. Bhatt. I think the points about what the real solutions are very well. There is no option but to push for the real solution, which is repatriation of the Rohingyas to their homes and hearts, and economic dignity and security, with guarantee for their livelihood, etc. So, the question of guarantee comes in. Who guarantees? Because we've seen that these people came out to Bangladesh several times. They went back and they went pushed back. And every time they were burnt and burnt progressively worse. So why would they leave if the Myanmar government says, okay, we guarantee you? I don't think that they will do. They will give some higher guarantees, and that can only be provided by a combination of countries that are friendly to Myanmar and Bangladesh, and some important international organizations like UNHCR, IOM, Red Cross Society, the UN itself, the whole of the UN itself, and also with some international organizations. Can they create a body, a joint working group or whatever you call it, that will be available to provide the supervision and guarantee that any promises that are made to these people that they safe and they will given their rights back, which were snatched away from them, the rights that they had in the Constitution of 1947 and subsequently, which were gradually taken away from them, that they will be given back to them. So, can we see that this is possible, that there will be an international arrangement to provide this guarantee not only just for their final resettlement or final rehabilitation in their homes, but even before that, when they will be in the current camps, the transit camps as we call it. I mean, there has been this concept of safe zone. The Myanmarese authorities perhaps are allergic to this idea, the word safe zone, but they have agreed to transit camps, etc. Why don't we have the transit camps happen quickly? And many transit camps all over the areas from where these people came.
So the question is, who give the guarantee of the safety? That's the prime question. Yes.
One is the transit camps as well as the permanent solution. And what is the way forward in changing the narrative, as Honorable Hamid Al-Bar said, getting a new
So two questions. The first one is who guarantees, then second is who, true new narrative of the situation. So I'll take one more question over there, and then we'll come back to you. Could you introduce yourself and make it a specific question, and for whom that one?
This is Accra. So in the keynote speech, we heard that we need to get to the root cause to get to any solution, right? To the extent of our knowledge, the ethnic groupings sprung from intolerance of the Rohingya community in Myanmar. So my question is that we've always worked along the lines of sanctions or military involvement when it comes to solving this kind of problem with foreign soil. But is there any way the international bodies can influence an organic change in Myanmar to tackle this root problem of intolerance?
Thank you very much. So I think we'll come again to the floor. So let's have the response from. Yeah. So the first bit first. I think I think, but one of the question was directed to you as well. Who guarantees? Because the proposition is yours.
Big question from Ambassador Munshi. In fact, I'm glad that you brought it out today. We have been thinking that eventually, what happened, I wish we had little more time to explain why we did the way we did. In the past, we have thought that our responsibility ends when they cross over to the other side. I'm not saying it. But this time we realize that it doesn't end with their return. So that's the question of how do you guarantee that they will continue to remain in their own homeland and enjoy all the rights they're supposed to enjoy, which they were anyway enjoying from 1948 till 62. It's not that these people have always been different. They're not like Palestinians. It's different. And it's not that the Arabs, along with the Palestinian, launched a war against the Israelis, and the end result was they lost terribly, and this was the consequences. Here, that was not the case. It was a very well-planned, thought-out marginalization of a group of people. And it was not only Rohingyas. They have 134 minorities. They have always struggled with these minorities. They have never been in peace within themselves. This is a state which has never been in peace. They have always been fighting, whether it is under a democratic government or a military government. Irrespective of the nature of the state, they have always been fighting among themselves. Fighting among minorities, whichever way you describe. Currently, they are not only fighting or killing Muslims, they are also killing their own Buddhist, ethnically different population. Go to Thailand, go to Laos, go to China, you will see how people have been pushed out of their own homeland where they have been living for ages. So, the guarantee. The first focus of ours was, let's go to the Security Council. See whether Security Council, because Security Council is the guarantor of peace and stability globally. That's what we decided in 1945. So the Security Council, because the way it works, it could not bring out a resolution. In fact, in this folder, I have a draft of a resolution which, as a pen holder, UK drafted and circulated. And they worked on it for 3 months. But there was no consensus because of particularly 2 countries, I'll not name them. So that draft still on the table. And that actually considers punitive action against the state of Myanmar for doing what they did to the Rohingyas. So that's still live, but in the absence of that, what we thought that let's look at an alternative in terms of guarantor. The other alternative is, and this is very new, is called independent inquiry mechanism. That is the other way of saying that if a state has really abused their own nationals and created a huge exodus, then these need to be documented by the UNGA, well, IIIM process, and then you keep it, and at an appropriate moment you bring a case against that state. So we went to the UNGA, and UNGA has actually brought out 2018 a triple IM mechanism for Rohingyas, for Myanmar. And also, Secretary General has appointed a special representative to deal with it. So that's the other guarantor that we are talking about. But at the end, who is supposed to protect their own people? There is something called R2P, right to protect. State is fundamentally responsible to protect its own citizens. Also citizens who are sort of expelled from the other country. And that is why the refugee concept came in. That's why Bangladesh, even if it wish, tomorrow cannot push out the Rohingyas, because it, as an international entity, it has certain responsibility to the international community. That's from where its guarantee comes. The guarantee is an international moral standing that would be compelled to Myanmar to deal with it. So we're looking at all the possibilities, both in terms of Security Council and non-Security Council mechanism. In terms of root causes of intolerance, very good question. I know our young colleague has been trying to provoke us in terms of other options. I can assure you that we have looked at all options. Looking at the nature of the state that Bangladesh is, we decided that we will go for peace and prosperity. We will not go non-peace and non-military, non-peace and a military way of resolving this problem. This is not something which would be able to stabilize our region. You know, this Rohingyas, and that's why I sort of allude you to a question that it is a geopolitical issue. It has always been a geopolitical issue. This is where two big powers of Asia met. You know, if you look at the history, I was listening to some of the discussion of today. If you look at the history, there were times when big neighbors from Asia, let's not name, used to send scouts in this border to see how the other big neighbor is doing, what they are doing, how is the trade evolving, because there wasn't much of a CNN and BBC in those days. So this is where the fault line is. This is what the Second World War fault line is. I have a map saying there is a red fault line, because when the Japanese was trying to walk into Indian subcontinent, they pushed the border. And the first thing they wanted to do is push the border to get the warm water port. And British, along with these Rohingyas, always ensured that the invading forces, in those days Japan, could not get the access to the warm water port. And the warm water port was Cox's Bazar. So this has always been a fault line. It's continued to remain a fault line. So it's a geopolitical issue also. I'll not be surprised that 10, 15 years time when we grow up, do research, we'll find out that it was the movement of Rohingyas was just a facade. It was much bigger game played behind it, I wish.
Thank you very much. We'll go. Yes, please. Can you be very precise that whom this question is directed to?
My question, I'm Mahbubur Rahman, Professor of Political Science and Social Work at Transfer University. My question is to Mr. Shahidul Haq and Dr. Alvar. Can Bangladesh ask for reparation? Be a joint effort on the part of Bangladesh and Myanmar to ask for that we can go to Court of Justice and International Court of Justice and ask for that jointly or also Bangladesh. So thank you very much.
Let's go to our younger colleagues. Those who will be
Hello.
My name is Siam, and I'm a student at Transfer University. My question is related to Shahidul Haq, sir. It's a two-part question, so please bear with me. The first scenario where we have foreign players with P5 nations actually having economic ties with Myanmar. They're creating industries and factories and such beliefs do exist within the international community, which also resulted in why the solutions were vetoed by the United Nations Security Council. And given the fact that Bangladesh's foreign policy is a peaceful one, where does this entire scenario lead to? Because we're not taking any direct solutions. Our solutions are not binding as for now. So what is the end game of this current crisis? Thank you.
Hello. May I ask another question? I'm Sharif, graduate student of International Relations, University of Chittagong. My question is especially to Salimul Haq sir. We know that because of Rohingya influx, there are a lot of environmental implications. So what the global regimes are doing on it and our national strategy to recover the environmental destruction, please.
Hello, sir. My name is Mohammed Shariful Alam Saad, and I'm a student of NSU. Sir, my question would be that we all know that Myanmar is bordered with two big nations who play a major role in the world. One is India, and the other is China. Now, we haven't seen a lot of action from both these nations when it comes to the main problems of Myanmar. And another thing is that in most cases, China has not actually spoken a lot about Myanmar. And also that in case there's proof of genocide, and if there's like any national crisis of defense regarding this whole issue, how would Bangladesh tackle it? I mean, Bangladesh is bound to answer to both the nations like China and India, because we are very good allies with China and India, whether it's economically or whether it's geopolitically. So I'd like to ask for an answer from you, sir. And it's actually an honor to have you here right now. So thank you.
My name is Simon Khatun. I'm Associate Professor of the Jaffna University. My question is to the Foreign Secretary, Mr. Shukla. It is understandable that the repatriation is the most important concern for Bangladesh. But the reality is we are having Rohingya for more than 4 decades. So when we are operating the programs for Rohingya, for example, for education and their ability to go to work and earn for themselves instead of feeding Rohingya for decades. So is there any midterm plan from the government to tackle the issue instead of the ad hoc short-term programs? Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Mansoor Imdad. I come from the University of Dhaka. My question is addressed to our Honorable Foreign Secretary.
I have a name. Yes. Call me by name.
Mr. Shahid. Yes. Okay, so basically my question is simple. You said that we have obtained some sort of new directions in our foreign policy due to the handling of the Rohingya crisis. Could you specify one or two set of policies for you handling that?
Assalamu alaikum, sir. My name is Jawad Rahman, and I am a student of North South University. Uh, my question is there are many among the Rohingyas who want to dwell in Bangladesh. They have been stated it in many public or mass media, and who want to stay here, they have been habituated with these surroundings of Bangladesh. Many of the families are comfortable enough to call this place their home. What is the plan? What is the plan about them? Would they be given a choice to take whether they can stay here and take part in the population mainstream of Bangladesh, or they will be sent back to Rakhine State again? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. My name is Abdul Jawad. I'm working in Apple Foundation. We're also operating in some sort of science center in Ethiopia. My two questions. One is, sir, do you think this community is ready for national security? And second question is, from the very beginning, our government signed on this issue and engaged a lot of our security force, our military, our intelligence, and also our administration and engaged a lot of times. And Bangladesh government engaged so many, even our Prime Minister is concerned, Foreign Ministry, so many stakeholders are working on this issue.
Here, can you say that it's just transferring burden from their country to your country? Is it?
Okay.
Thank you.
Are they transferring their burden to our country? Well, all right. So, okay, last question that we'll take now, and then we'll come back. Yes, please, introduce yourself.
Sir, I'm Mutasim from North South University. So my question is that amid this great humanitarian crisis, I see this as a big financial victory for Bangladesh, as a lot of monetary aid is coming from the international community to my country. So will it be good for our country to keep the Rohingyas in our country for a while so that the money keep coming in?
Do you have any idea how much what is statistical terms, how much, what is the amount that perhaps you think is coming in?
I don't have an exact data, but I'm just stating an opinion.
That's very interesting dimension. Thank you. I see. Okay. Well, Shahidul is saying that it's a kind of a Myanmar narrative maybe coming in one of the media, most probably. Well, but he'll answer that later on. So we'll stop right now. And any questions over there? Yes, please.
My name is Mohammed Hussain. I'm currently a student of Seoul University. I think Myanmar wants to fight against us. The reason is they already done enough of the war. Also, when Rohingya came in Bangladesh, that time they broke our airspace. So my question is, there is a lot of Rohingya in our country. I heard some of our agents. So my concern is our security is under threat, and we are a small country. We have a limited food.
All right, security is under threat. That's it. Any more? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Fahim Hussain, a professor of Arizona State University, and I do research with access to information for the FDMNs and displaced population in general. I actually have a question for our guest from the specialist of Myanmar. From our honorable guests, we have heard that there is a history of conflict with the minorities within the state of Myanmar, the Federacy of Myanmar. So what do you foresee for the future generations, because the country has opened up again, in terms of education, in terms of this inclusion? So in future, this may not happen. Of course, we are going to solve it, God willing, but how to avoid it? Because things are going to go on. Myanmar cannot be free of all the others except the Burmans, right? So what's your thought on that, in a pragmatic way, as you're a big fan of pragmatism?
So I'll take a couple of more questions and then we'll give it to the panel. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Mehdi Choudhury. I work for Bolton University in IT Economics. So my question is for also our guest from Myanmar. Actually, I followed research from about the refugee crisis, and I was looking at the literature, and I was finding that if you look at the literature, which is almost talking about the primary victim, all the research, which is the primary victim, which is important, no question about that. But the secondary victim, that's Bangladesh. And also if you look at the other parts of the world, also there are many secondary victim countries. You cannot see research on the impact on those countries. So why is this status of the
Okay. So we shall stop it now, and then I will give the floor to Dr. Salimullah. First question you can start, and then you can take your.
Thank you very much. So on the environmental situation, let me just share some experience that we had under the aegis of the IOM, the International Organization for Migration. My center, along with a number of colleagues and experts from Bangladesh, we did almost a year-long environmental monitoring and assessment of both inside the camps and around the camps, and identified impacts on biodiversity around the camps, on pollution within the camps, air pollution, water pollution, physical waste management, and made a number of observations and recommendations, which I'm very pleased to say every single one is now being addressed. We are doing waste management, we're doing fecal waste management, water management, even the cutting of the biodiversity around the camps has been reduced by providing them with LPG gas now for cooking. And so the observation that I have, and especially since I had the opportunity to visit over that year, is that the crisis handling of this situation, from a crisis to managing it now, I would say is phenomenal. And I would say this is not just government of Bangladesh, although they certainly deserve credit, but it's the people of Bangladesh, the NGOs like BRAC and others who are working there. Even in the international agencies like UNHCR and IOM, there's Bangladeshi colleagues there who are working day and night to try and solve these problems. And every day they see a problem and they come up with a solution of how we're going to deal with this problem. And they are doing it now. This crisis has been reduced to a non-crisis within a very, very short period of time. And I would say that belongs credit to the people of Bangladesh, led by the government of Bangladesh, and something we don't recognize so easily. And I would like to pay homage to that. And I'd like to also take this opportunity to make one other point. One of the things that is a peculiar feature of the Rohingya population that has come into Bangladesh is the very large proportion of little children. This is unusual in refugee populations around the world. And so, in effect, we are now the in loco parentis of these children. They are our children. They're on our ground. Many of them were born here. You know, the number born on Bangladesh soil is now in the many hundreds, if not thousands. So we have some responsibility towards them, whether they repatriate in the end or don't, or something happens. Right now, we need to look after them. And I would say that's, to me, a high priority for all of us together to look after. And picking up from Morshid's point, is something, if we neglect to do that, it'll be a much bigger burden later on when these children grow up. Right now, we may not make them citizens of Bangladesh, but we make them good global citizens of the globe. And that's our responsibility, and I think we should take that. Thank you.
It's your turn now to give your response to that.
Thank you very much. I think this is actually the first time that I'm seeing colloquium or discourse organized by the academics and UNHCR that has attracted a lot of focused discussion. And I think there have been a lot of suggestions also coming from the floor. But I think my own experience is that we have to decide that there must be repatriation. There is no, alternative to that. If two is that maybe this is Myanmar itself. The Burman have to move from the attitude of domination to the attitude of treating everyone as part of the citizenry of Myanmar. Because surprisingly, I thought that the one that were in Malaysia, majority, the great number should be Rohingyas. But actually more than 50% are not Rohingyas. There are other minorities who runs away from persecution. The story of persecution in Myanmar is a common factor. So it is, Myanmar must be made to understand that to be a member of the international community, they have also got to make certain decisions instead of being firm to say this is not, that's how we want it to deal, don't interfere. And I think finally I would just like to add, this one I am able to say so because I am not a member of the government. I think Dr. Shaidu, he said that he is constrained because he therefore is not transparent. I've been slightly transparent because I feel that the solution, other than in Bangladesh, must be with ASEAN and the United Nations. If you remember, we have when we had the Aceh problem, Indonesia finally succumbed to the international pressure and decided for a negotiated settlement. But the Achinis were a bit nervous about those that were really the activists of the whole process. So what we did in ASEAN at that stage was, with the agreement of Indonesia, to form an international monitoring team so that the repatriation, coming back, people coming home, do not feel threatened or fear for their life, or that the justice or rule of law process will be ignored. So it worked very well because Malaysia we had bigger recipient of Achinis. We were bigger recipient of Achinis than any other country. Indonesia, because of that, at the initial stage, we were not brought into the monitoring team because Indonesia feel a bit nervous with us, maybe, but we are interested to see Indonesia is able to resolve its own internal problems. We do not want to interfere. And thirdly, I think ASEAN also has to come up categorically to see that they have to define what is non-interference, what is respect or equality or sovereignty. If it is inside the country, it's okay. But this one, there is an overflow. It is no longer that particular country internal affairs. And I think they are now beginning, ASEAN is beginning to address, but they're addressing it as a humanitarian issue. I would tend to agree with Dr. Shaidu to say that this one is a geopolitical issue. And geopolitical issue, you need to look at it deeper. And I think we should actually encourage and make Myanmar feel comfortable to be a citizenry of the world, not of itself. It's no longer isolated. No man is an island. And this is the situation that Myanmar is facing that it needs to overcome. Thank you.
Now, we'll start again.
All right, let me respond to your question. Let's go back to history a little bit. Myanmar at the time was called Burma, gained independence from the British on January 4, 1948. Then, before the country got independence, they were already struggle for independence, or let's say autonomous state, or let's say greater autonomy. Different people call it different way, or self-determination. Then once the country gained independence, that did not happen. Initially, some of the ethnic nationalities, we did not call minorities at the time, they struggle for what they call independence from the mainland Burma. But that did not happen. Then, as time goes on, these days they no longer talk about independence or let's say self-determination. They rather use federalism, which is the most talked about a topic in Myanmar these days. In fact, I just published an article on a quest for federalism in Myanmar by Rolex from UK. If you get a chance, you can read that. What happens is that initially they were fighting for independence, but as time went on, they shift that movement into a more what I call federalism structure, where power is divided, delegated to states. Then, as you may know, the government has organized what they call the 21st Panglong Conference. Then they have held several times now since the Deng Xiang era. But so far, the most challenging question or issue that is most difficult to deal with is the question of federalism. And I want to be optimistic here. Definitely, there has been conflict, as our foreign secretary, I met him last year, University of Dhaka, on a similar conference. What happens is that there are 3 stages of struggle in Myanmar. Number one is people who want democratic rights. That's the majority Burmans. And the second groups are states. They would like to have greater autonomy in the areas. The third group is ethnic groups which do not have their own state and strive for that recognition. I mean, there is one more layer. Let's say there are groups of people who would like to be recognized, such as Rohingya. So they are the 4 layers of struggle within the country. And the hope is that eventually we will see a full democracy. For those of you who study politics and international relations, you would know a hybrid regime, or let's say democratization process. In Myanmar, we have what we call a hybrid regime, which is an incremental democratization. It's not a full yet. It's still a country in transition. And I would like to be optimistic here that at some point, someday, we would see a democracy where the rights of ethnic minorities are respected, which is not happening yet. Today, you see the Arokans, they are fighting on their own territory. The Kachins are fighting. The Karens, or name it, every ethnic minorities are fighting for this greater autonomy. And let's hope that this eventually is recognized and the government is giving them the rights they deserve. And coming to your question, if I remember correctly, you're talking about why importance is not given on secondary literature, right? I mean, secondary victims. I think if I may disagree with you here, I am a specialist on Myanmar and also looking at the broader Southeast Asia and Asia Pacific. But it depends on what your interest and what your objective is. For example, my interest is on Myanmar. I have published 3 books, for example. I focus on the political aspect of the issue. And I look at the ethnic minorities versus the central government. But there are some people, some scholars who focus on the role of international community, or maybe the second country or the third country which deals with those problems. So it depends on who you look at and what your interests are. Definitely there are scholars out there who are looking at second victims or secondary victims.
I think we have gone to the first round, and I'll give one more response to the panel to really give their final words on that. Then I'll struggle to really make a summary of what I've gathered, maybe about 10 to 12 points that I have gathered from here.
Thank you. I think the questions really reflected various narrative that the Honorable Secretary mentioned, and I guess this is important that one takeaway from this discussion is really we need to work on the narrative and get everybody on board. And frankly, personally, I don't think there cannot be any solution other than repatriation of these Rohingyas. When we discussed, we did several research. They basically said, the food that you are giving us is good for our belly, but our hearts still belong to Myanmar, and we cannot just ignore that. Thank you.
So I get asked a lot if I'm optimistic or pessimistic about the whole return and how this will happen, what do you think will happen in the future? And generally speaking, I don't really like that question because it assumes and presupposes that we are observing this process from the side as opposed to influencing it and being part of it. So the one short message that I would like to send to the young students here is that think about what you can do to make this situation better, whether it's every single person here can contribute to work towards, because we're all working towards the same objective here ultimately, and to make sure that Rohingyas are able to return with dignity and integrity. So whether you are a foreign secretary or a student or a freshman student, there is something you can do, and this is what I would like to urge everyone in the auditorium to do, is what can I do today, tomorrow, the day after that to improve the situation. Thank you.
What I'll do, there's a session. Some of the questions I will answer after. So thereby we don't wait up.
I think I just have got very, very short points that I want to mention. I think we have recognized the challenges. We have recognized that whatever solution must be sustainable. We have identified the symptoms as well as the problems. So two things that is important for us to move forward. And I think this was mentioned by my colleague just now. I think two things that will ensure is sustainability and success. That is implementation. We almost know what these are the things that we need to do. And the other thing is coordination. Otherwise, there will be overlapping, all of us trying to do. So we need two important issues that we need to tackle and manage the whole crisis until it comes to a satisfactory end based on humanity and justice. So thank you.
Thank you. Now, we had about an hour and a half, very exciting, interesting discussion. Our core question was, what are the sustainable way and approach towards addressing Myanmar crisis? So our discussion really spread all around, but few things that emerged very broad and macro level. First, I believe that one of the concern has been raised by of the panelists, directly, indirectly, is India-China relation and it's the silence. Panelists and the floor also believe that for a sustainable solution, China and India's silence has to be really understood, and they have to be engaged in this process. And of course, similar concern is being raised for a sustainable solution solution lies not necessarily on relief approach, but we have to recognize it's a geopolitical issue. So that's the important. And some of the observers from the panel and also from the gallery raised the concern that for them it looks like UN has been ineffective. Exactly the word has been used. And similarly, it has also been noticed by some of the panelists as well as from the floor that international actors, some of them really suffer from a dualism. and therefore there is kind of dual role some of them have played. And Foreign Secretary has particularly mentioned one very interesting dimension is that he says Bangladesh-Myanmar relationship is in a fluid level. So it's changing, and it's very difficult to develop a strategy, especially from Myanmar's point of view. They are changing very quickly, and therefore it's very difficult to follow a very persistent strategy. Another observation that has been evolved, that repetition is a lengthy process. It's a trust-building process. It's a process of understanding. And this has not been created, and it's a very challenging one. And suggestion has been made there must be more productive engagement of the major actors. And major actors refers to international partners as well as Myanmar and Bangladesh. They should be productively engaged, and that has been missing for a sustainable solution. One observation is very interesting made here, that it is not resource or money that can solve the problem. It is perhaps, quote unquote, political will of the leadership in the region. That is a very significant portion. And finally, another thing is that there has been some disjointed efforts being made by international community. There is perhaps a scope for having more further coordinated approach by the international communities to really address it. When it's international communities, it's the bilateral partners and also CSOs and others. So the coordination of efforts is another significant observation that we have seen needed to be done as being observed. Now, with that few words, I close the session here for next session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Salahuddin, and all the panelists of the Policy Colloquium. Can I request the panelists to go and take the seat? We have the next session where our Foreign Secretary again will chair. So I request him to be seated there. And thank you again for a very vibrant and interesting Policy Colloquium when we had discussion. So can I now request the panelists of the next session to come and take seat? So we have a plenary at the last, and the theme of the plenary is the voices from the field. So in this plenary, we will have speakers, Ms. Rajia Sultana, lawyer, and also Rohingya representative. Ms. Rajia Sultana, please come and take seat. We have Abdullah Al Hassan Chowdhury, Additional Secretary, Minister of Education. Can I request him to come and take seat? And also Mr. M.A. Kashem, Member Board of Trustee, North South University, to please come and take seat, sir. And also Mr. Earl Miller, U.S. Ambassador to Bangladesh.
She is also a coordinator of the Free Rohingya Coalition and Arakan Rohingya National Organization. Ms. Sultana has been awarded the United States International Women of Courage IWOC Award for her work with Rohingya refugees in 2019. Without further ado, I'd like to request Ms. Razia Sultana to share her thoughts and ideas on Rohingya crisis and possible solutions. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon. Can you see me? I thought I'm a mosquito. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to say something. I'm a Rohingya lawyer already. My honor sister, she described my introduction, so I'm not going over there. I'm of Rohingya origin, and I am a Rohingya still, and I am very proud to be by origin a Rohingya, but in spite I'm also a Bangladeshi. So I am giving the Bangladesh government and Bangladesh people to give a shelter to my community. So this is a very big for us. Thank you so much. The ethnic Rohingya is one of the many nationalities of the Union of Myanmar. They are fighting for their very survival as a people. They are struggling for their rights of self-determination, which will guarantee their collective rights, the rights to rule their homeland by themselves, the right to practice their religious teaching and culture freely, the right to teach, learn, and promote their language freely, and the right to uphold their identity without fear and live peacefully together with other ethnics. We therefore claim that the ultimate goal of our struggles is to establish a genuine federal union of Myanmar, which will guarantee democratic rights for all citizens, political equality for all nationalities, and the right of self-determination for all member states of the Union, including ethnic Rohingya. Only policy reform that the review and recognize the citizenship of the Rohingyas and provide them with social justice will resolve this socio-political problem in the long term. The Rohingya have been persecuted and deprived of their fundamental rights by successive military regime in Myanmar for decades. This has led to repeated large influx of refugees into Bangladesh in the 1970s and 1990s, but the largest influx by far was in 2017, when the Myanmar army launched their deadly operation in northern Rakhine state, what you old name is Arakan, killing thousands of civilians, burning hundreds of villages, and driving over 700,000 Rohingya into Bangladesh. The scale and horror of the atrocity committed by the Myanmar troops has been exposed again and again in the media and documented by international agencies. There is strong evidence that the operation was pre-planned and constituted genocide, as declared by the UN fact-finding mission. However, the Myanmar government until today continue to deny that its troops committed any crimes. The military leaders that authorized the genocide remain in power, and the troops continue to commit crime with impunity. In Rakhine State, the Myanmar army is now targeting the Rakhine Buddhists, who are being captured and tortured to death. They have imposed an internet blackout in this area so that news of the atrocities does not leak out. It is therefore impossible for Rohingya refugees to return under this current situation. The Bangladesh government reached an agreement in October 2018 with Myanmar government for return of the Rohingya refugees. But nothing has moved forward except that the Myanmar government has built some transit camps and keep announcing that they are ready for repatriation. But of course, no Rohingya refugee dare to return, because there is no security, no guarantee they can return to their own original home, and no guarantee of citizenship. The Myanmar government is only willing to grant so-called National Verification Card or NVC card to returning Rohingya. NVC card is not only for Rohingya, and Rohingya is ethnic of Arakan, so NVC card is not for Rohingya. Now I'm telling about the camp situation as a field ground level activist. One of the problems we have been seeking to address is human trafficking. Women and girls are being lured out of the camps, sometimes with promise of marriage, give a good job or better life, and then forced into bonded labor, including sex work and sex slave. And another issue is being serious matter is child marriage. It's have stopped by counseling and proper awareness might be helpful to prevent this crime. Worried about protection, so parents take this step. I cannot blame them. According to several sources, the situation at the camp, a massive change at night with several deprived Rohingyas engaged in open trade and abuse of narcotics along with the unlawful act. This is happening or happened because absence of light and proper monitoring, also problem related to infrastructure. Trafficking and drug ring that include Rohingya men have become notoriously active in this camp, adding to lack of security. Some, but few Rohingya is getting involved in crime which is triggering violence, murder and other breaches of law. In last 2 years, few Rohingya have become involved in murder, smuggling, rape and human trafficking. Also worried about illegal weapon, what is linked to drug and drug trade is not controlled by the Rohingya. It is true some groups are involved of illegal activity with help by others. And confidently can say, still there is not that much strong link that local security cannot control. It can be prevented and as much as soon. The proper law system and proper awareness, there are so many things happen, so it might be focused by local government. Thousands of Rohingya men in this camp who are unemployed, hungry for education and essential need and with an uncertain future ahead. It is not surprising for recent circumstances that some of them will resort to crime. And it goes without saying that the most vulnerable group in this camp are Rohingya women and girls who fell victim to violence either inside their makeshift home by their partners or outside by the Rohingya man. And of course, local. The area in there are controlled by a specific security, but after the night, after the evening, there is some security, but it's not proper. So some unlawful groups and some, this is not too much, but it's a some group, they're intentionally doing something what is not that type focusing, but it's become a serious matter if you are not focusing that issue. Trafficking and drug gangs, this is not for recent. It already long time ago, and now the Rohingya is a huge amount of there, and they are now mixed with them. So for this issue, you cannot blame the Rohingya nation. 1 or 2% may be bad, but not the whole nation. So I urge, please don't blame the Rohingya. That every community, every nation have the bad person. But the bad person, if you mention by a nation, it's to hurt. There are some rumors that Rohingya and host community between both are tensionized. I just came from today from camp. Last 1 week, I tried to find out what is tension between the host community and Rohingya. But it is true. Something, but it's not that type. Maybe environmental, maybe land grabbing, but it is a duty of the local government and NGO. They can prevent this one. Environment issue and social structure are under threat. This is very sensitive issue, and it's not overnight you can change, because the huge of more than 1 million people, they live in this jungle. Yes, it will be jungle because it's still there. Me also face the rat and snake, and also there is so many things. So environmental is by force, but I'm sorry about this because these people, they cannot spread all over the Bangladesh. At least they are stay in that area. So maybe they're getting the help. I want to inform and arguing you all not to be believed the rumors that are being spread about the Rohingya links with Islamic terrorists such as Al-Qaeda and IS. This is a false narrative, which was used by Myanmar army to justify the explosion of the Rohingya, but is now being spread by the Hindu Tabat lobby in Bangladesh to create fear and hatred of the Rohingya. They feel threatened by the solidarity between Bengali and Rohingya Islamic communities, which can serve as example for the rest of the Muslim world. I urge you all to keep this precious solidarity intact and to support the aspiration of the Rohingya for safe, voluntary, and dignified return of their homeland. About Bangladesh policy, I fully agree Rohingya issue is placing a huge burden on Bangladesh. And I fully understand that the Bangladesh leaders are frustrated with Myanmar integration. And the international community failure to pressure Myanmar to recognize the Rohingya as citizens and provide international security for them to return safely for their own homes. You are likely aware that there has been no strong action yet in the Rohingya issue at the UN level because of the Chinese and Russia veto at the UN Security Council. There has not even been arms embargo, let alone referral to the International Criminal Court. However, there have recently been hopeful signs of increased international pressure. The UN Human Rights Council has established a new mechanism to prepare case file for future persecution of Myanmar leaders. This was a landmark achievement. The case to bring Myanmar to the International Criminal Court for the crime of forced deportation of the Rohingya to Bangladesh is also moving as steadily ahead, and for a formal investigation is likely to begin soon. Since the OIC decision is since the OIC decision in March this year to take Myanmar to the International Court of Justice for the crime against the Rohingya, the process has also been moving ahead, with Gambia tasked to lead the case. There have also been widespread call in Canada and Netherlands to make Myanmar to the ICJ for the Rohingya genocide. And earlier this month, the US State Department imposed travel sanction on Myanmar top military leaders, including Commander-in-Chief Min Aung Hlaing. These are the first international sanction against the top military chief. All earlier sanctions were only on his subordinates. These are the huge blow for the prestige of the Myanmar military and sends a clear signal that the US has lost patience with the previous engagement approach. Other countries are now likely to follow suit. At the same time, inside Myanmar, the army is facing increased pressure. The NLD government and ethnic political parties are pushing for constitutional change to limit the power of the military. And the offensive by the Arakan army in western Myanmar is taking a huge toll on the Myanmar army. I personally am working with other activists from the different ethnic communities in Myanmar who are strongly opposed to the extremist Buddhist nationalist movement and who share a vision of a democratic federal union where all ethnic nationalities, including Rohingya, can have self-determination and equal rights. I therefore believe that there is a hope for political change in Myanmar and that Bangladesh will not have to bear the burden of the Rohingya refugee indefinitely. Bangladesh has gained great international political credit for hosting the Rohingya refugee. It can continue to keep this credit by implementing human and progressive policies towards the refugee. One issue which can gain further credit for Bangladesh is the education issue. Right now, formal education is not yet authorized for the Rohingya refugee children. So most children are just staying in donor-supported child-friendly space where they are supervised to play game and sing. In fact, all Rohingya families want their children to be formally educated. And there are thousands of educated Rohingya who can teach them in the camp. But right now, this is not formally allowed. So the refugee have to set up informally community school to teach themselves, but donors are not officially allowed to support them. This policy must be changed. It is the right of every child to be educated, and Bangladesh should allow formal schooling for all children with Rohingya teachers and with a curriculum chosen by the Rohingya themselves. As stated by UNIST, investment in education is desperately needed to avert a lost generation of Rohingya children. Another positive step which Bangladesh can take is to abandon the plan to relocate the refugee to Bhasan Char Island. No Rohingya want to relocate it there because it is so isolated and unsafe. The Rohingya want to stay near the Myanmar border, near their old home, because they hope one day to return. By relocating to the island, it will be like accepting that they can never return. They will therefore have to be relocated by force, which will be an international public relations disaster for Bangladesh. Finally, and most importantly, Bangladesh must keep supporting the refugees' right for voluntary, safe, and dignified return. The Rohingya have suffered two failed repatriation for Bangladesh in the past 1978 and 1993, and the mistake must not be repeated. The only way that return can be sustainable is if Rohingya are recognized as full citizens with full right and are provided with international protection when they return. Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been calling for a safe zone for Rohingya to return to Myanmar. This is what Rohingya are calling for: protected return to protected homeland. Rohingya are calling for the 3 townships in northern Arakan, Mongdu, Butidong, and Ratidong, the area where most refugees came from, to be declared a protected zone. Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is calling for regional security force to provide protection to the Rohingya in this zone. This will be acceptable for Rohingya, but only if Western power are also involved in this initiative. There must be coordination among the United Nations and all global power to pressure Myanmar for safe and quick repatriation. The USA, Russia, and China need to play a vital role in this regard. It was very encouraging that on Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's recent visit to China, China assured her they would pressure Myanmar to expedite of safe repatriation of Rohingya. At last, I want to say, presenting the Rohingya as a vulnerable community, a low-class community, is just a tactic of misguide the civil society for divert the main issues that they can be more concerned about the NGO project and other only growing. And this kind of rumor and this kind of vulnerable issue is only growing the disconnecting with the Rohingya and other community. Return home back is our first priority. Create a safe zone not only for Rohingya, for all ethnic and minority who belong to Arakan. Concern and concentrate the issue of human safety, not in investing. Find the way to unity to then Arakan will peace. Arakan is land of Rohingya, Rakhine, and other minority. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sultana, for your well-articulated speech emphasizing the need for guaranteed human rights, democratic rights, political equality, and the rights for self-determination for ethnic Rohingya population, including social justice and recognized citizenship for Rohingyas. Before I invite the next speaker, I'd like to introduce one more guest among us sitting on the dais, Mr. Manuel Marcos Pereira. Pardon me if I pronounce it wrong. So Mr. Pereira is the Deputy Chief of Mission IOM, Cox's Bazar. So now I would like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Muhammad Abdullah Al Hassan Chowdhury, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Education, Government of Bangladesh.
Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. Honorable Chair and His Excellency Earl Miller, Ambassador of US to Bangladesh, and other discussant, ladies and gents. Actually, I'm not expert on the Rohingya issues. I worked in Yangon, in Bangladesh Embassy, Yangon, as commercial counselor. And during that time, actually, from the post, I've observed some incidents there, and I will tell you something from my own experience. Actually, at the time, an interest grew in me to know the history of this community, because I saw a committed attack on them, and I saw something actually which pained me. And now I will tell you something out of my experience. First of all, actually, we all know that Rohingya have been described as the most persecuted community by the UN, and this persecution, we know, started long before. Actually, when army captured power in Myanmar in 1962, this persecution started, and they adopted hostile policy towards this community and unleashed xenophobic propaganda against them. In 1978, they conducted an operation when many panic-stricken Rohingya crossed over to Bangladesh, and at the time also, you know, they were repatriated through negotiation. And after that, this incident kept repeating. And when I was there in Myanmar, from 2012 to 2015, actually many incidents happened. And in 2012, there was a sectarian violence in Rakhine State. And at that time also, there was actually large influx of Rohingya in Bangladesh, though Bangladesh government at the time actually followed another policy. Government did not open the border, rather it was closed, but Rohingya who came to Bangladesh were returned with some humanitarian aids. It was given by the BJP, and our foreign policy was at the time not to open the border, but to help Rohingya how to tackle the situation. I can remember that in 2012, from a very trifle incident which can easily be settled in the court, the violence started. A Rakhine girl was probably raped by 2 or 3 Rohingya boys, and it was the issue. There was laws, policemen, everything was there. They could take actually action against the offender. Ultimately they took. But on this issue, there was actually a lot of tensions, and some Rakhine extremists raided a bus which was carrying some Muslim who were not from this community, from Rohingya community. They are the Muslim of Yangon. They went to India, and probably all they were involved with Tabligh probably. For some rituals they went to India, and when they were coming back, the bus was attacked and many were killed. And this also created tension at the time in Yangon. And Muslims leaders in Yangon organized a protest meeting and also submitted a memorandum to the government. And involving this issue, actually some Rakhine extremists backed by the security forces created a reign of terror in Rakhine State. There was attack on the Rohingya, and many actually to save their life, fled their home, fled their place, but ultimately they could not go home. They were actually those who came to Situe from Mongdu or from other villages. They were ultimately taken to a makeshift camp, and they could not go back to the. Still, they are living there and in a most inhuman state. And not only this, there was information at the time to us that they are not given any Medicare facilities, even the relief, even the aid activists or those aid organizations were not allowed to go to the Rohingya people to distribute relief to them. So they were getting all sorts of obstruction, but the government was silent. The security force were backing them. I saw this. So actually, the Myanmar government plays a very mysterious role at that time. So Bangladesh actually always tried to solve the problem bilaterally. Bangladesh earlier did not take it to multilateral forum. At the time, our foreign secretary chairing this session visited Myanmar and also will talk with the Myanmar authorities about this problem. And but one thing I have seen that the Myanmar authority very meticulously actually unleashed propaganda at the time against this Rohingya people, and they also used some monks who were then actually giving propagating safety fire. And this also created tension and also led to many communal attacks. And you know that Rohingyas are fighting for their ethnicity. In 1982, when a citizenship law was enacted, the law actually recognized 129 ethnic group. Rohingya though demanded that they be recognized as an ethnic group, but ultimately they were not recognized, and at the time they were made non-citizen. But before that, they were citizen. They were citizen and they had all the rights. They have all the rights. They were also in the government. But after enacting this law, they were made non-citizen and they were deprived of all kinds of human rights. Even at that time, I saw they are actually they could not move from one place to another without the permission of the authority. They were deprived of their education. All kind of human rights. Actually, they were living in a very inhuman condition. It was some kind of apartheid prevailing there. This was the condition. So you can very easily imagine if a group of people live in this condition, what kind of actual reaction or consequences it may create. After Aung San Suu Kyi coming to power, it was a great expectation to her that she will do something for the Rohingya, and also actually accordingly she formed a commission which is known as Anand Commission with Kofi Annan as its chair. And when this report was submitted, and that very day probably, actually there was an attack on the police post we have seen in the newspaper, and many police were killed. And on the excuse of this, there was an operation on the Rohingya people, and a large scale exodus then took place, and at least now more than 500,000 actually Rohingyas are now in Bangladesh. Now actually I will just talk. Bangladesh has given shelter because if at the time, if Bangladesh did not open the border, there many, the situation would have been more worse. Actually, we know already the official figure shown by the government is more than actually I can't remember the figure at this moment, but it was a big figure of casualties at the time, though Myanmar government has given a very conservative figure about the massacre. And now actually what I think, what we need to do at this moment, the Bangladesh government is doing our foreign ministry is actually following the, I think, correct policy. Bangladesh is trying to solve the problem bilaterally, as well as the issue was taken to the multilateral forum, because it has already been proved without the international pressure, actually, this problem cannot be solved. International community must be involved. We have seen that when this after this massacre, or what UN says that the textbook example of ethnic cleansing, the international community actually got so much vocal, and US also playing very vital role, and they already banned the visit of some high military official to US. European Union also playing very active role, but we see that many actually some powers are not actually playing their proper role. Many resolution could not be adopted due to the role played by some powers, but I think they must be convinced about the problem. We need a durable and sustainable solution to this problem. Otherwise, it will keep repeating. And this is not at all actually, it will not bring bad consequences for Bangladesh only, or Myanmar. I think whole the region will be destabilized, because these people are vulnerable to be lured into any kind of militant activities or other crimes, because they are deprived of all kinds of rights. So international community as well as all others will have to think what to do as early as possible. So a dignified and safe return for the Rohingya must be ensured, must be done within short time, and international actors must play their role. Otherwise, and if not any sustainable solution is done, the crisis will be deepen more and more, and ultimately the whole region will be affected. So that's all from me. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing from your personal experience. And now I'd like to invite our next speaker, Mr. Manuel Marquez Pereira, Deputy Chief of Mission IOM Cox's Bazar.
Good afternoon. It's a different crowd from what I used to, but let's see if I can do this in the 5 minutes, right, you gave me? Okay. So first of all, thank you to North-South University and to Professor Catherine for inviting me. I think that the wisdom of this collective throughout today and tomorrow can speak more for what are the solutions for this crisis than my words, but I have 4 points very fast to share with you as a perspective from the field. First of all, I think that we should never forget not only the gesture of the government of Bangladesh on opening its doors, but above all, the complementary efforts that are done. The government of Bangladesh actually gave 24 square kilometers of land, 6,000 acres, to accommodate these individuals. The gesture of creating space to exist is probably one of the most humane things to do. And as humanitarian, I have been confronted throughout my life on the onset of a crisis with that creation. I was in Iraq with the United Nations before being here, and my daily struggle was to find space to safeguard the individuals that were coming out of Mosul on that bloody day. And the government of Bangladesh here, in a very short space of time, created that. The second is that, unfortunately, in the Facebook society that we have today, the attention span of the majority of the countries and institutions is fading away as a distant problem in someone's backyard. That cannot be permitted. The international community needs to shoulder the costs, the responsibilities, and the accountability of this crisis until it's resolved. And it will be resolved as the geopolitical problem that was told here many times throughout the day, with a political solution in Myanmar. Everything else that we do in the meantime is a band-aid. And my last point is to say about tensions and fights. From my perspective, and this is Manuel speaking, I think the challenges of the refugees and the host community in Cox's Bazar are exactly the same. They deal with economical empowerment needs, they deal with the risk of exploitation, and they deal with the exposure to hazards. They just have different solutions and different forms to address the problem. They are not different. The fight out of poverty, the right to quality education, the preservation of life in case of disasters are the same. They need different efforts, and we cannot lump them all in a solution and a very copy-paste approach. This to say, this problem is very complex, one of the worst and most complex crises I've ever worked with, but I am confident on the teams on the ground, on the government of Bangladesh and everyone on this room to do their part. And if we do so, as the honorable former minister from Malaysia said, we will not lose our humanity. I think that is what's at stake. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pereira. That's a very brief and focused talk. Thank you for that. Now, I'd like to invite our next speaker, Mr. M.A. Kashim, Member, Board of Trustees, North-South University. And he is also the former chairperson, Board of Trustees, North-South University, founder, life member, North-South University Trust, past president of the Federation of Bangladesh Chamber of Commerce and Industry, FBCCI, founder, chairman, and director, Southeast Bank Limited, and former chairman, Association of Private Universities of Bangladesh.
Distinguished chairman of this plenary session, Mr. Shahidul Haq, the Foreign Secretary, Minister of Foreign Affairs, distinguished speakers, Mr. M. Abdullah Al Hassan, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Education, His Excellency R. Miller, U.S. Ambassador to Bangladesh, Mr. Moinul Pereira, Deputy Chief of the Mission, Mrs. Razia Sultana, Human Rights Activist and Rohingya representatives, distinguished participants of the conference, faculty members, media representatives, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and Assalamu alaikum to all. First of all, I would like to congratulate the organizers of the North-South University and the sponsors of the conference for supporting not only a moral and humanitarian issue, but also for a cause which demands justice and urgent actions from the world leaders. Therefore, it is important to stage protest, debates, conferences, so that the Rohingya crisis
remain as one of the top UN agenda for, for resolving the crisis along with the big powers. Along with the formal response of the government, humanitarian agencies and the international actors, these deserves the discussion and debate in the academia for appreciating the magnitude of the problem and for the understanding and effective solution to the problem. The world has witnessed the forced migration and displacement of the contemporary times. The case is in Syria, and other migrants who are forced to migrate due to war, and they are being sheltered in many European countries. The case of Rohingya's influx in Bangladesh did not occur due to war, but by the mass killing of the Rohingya majority Muslim populations, expelling them from their own land by arson, rape, and looting of their properties. Rohingya Muslims community comprise less than 5% of the total population of majority of Buddhist community in Myanmar. The expulsion of the Rohingyas and its reunification are observed by the United Nations Human Rights Council, tantamount to the crime tried under the International Court of Law, which is principally committed by the Myanmar military. The United Nations independent investigator Yagi Lee has called upon the China and Russia to oppose the Myanmar government's violation of human rights. UN body condemned all rights violations in the Myanmar and called for the independent investigation into them, including against the Rohingya Muslims, to ensure that perpetrators of their held accountable. However, it is a matter of great disappointment that the role of big powers such as China and Russia and neighboring country India on the Rohingya crisis for condemning the heinous act was absent. Rather, what we have seen, the Russia and China voted against the resolution against Myanmar, and Japan abstained from voting. Therefore, we need to engage the big powers to resolve the crisis, stand by for the cause of the Rohingyas. We all know that since August 2017, an estimated about 700,000 Rohingya population from neighboring Myanmar have been pushed to Bangladesh territory, falling in the districts of Cox's Bazar. The government of Bangladesh and UNHRC and the NGOs have responded to this crisis. Well, besides this, I being a businessman and the past president of the Federation, which I feel and understand from my community, this business community particularly very much worried because Chittagong is the longest seashore of the country, rather maybe in the world. This was beautifully decorated. Cox's Bazar is a tourist center, and there we have some salt industries. We have some frozen fish process industries are there. These all are disturbed. The environment is totally destroyed. Moreover, in the area, people are complaining that farmers are not taking them as a labor because our laborers are getting 600 or 500 taka per day, whereas the Rohingya laborers are getting very cheap, hardly 200 or 300 takas. As a result, the workers are out of job. Similarly, a lot of problems has arisen. The forest is disturbed, rather destroyed. For all these concerns, I think the business community is worried when the problem will be solved. It is a part of the country. It is a wariness of the nation, and moreover, this in the morning session, our honorable chief guest, Mr. H. Imam, also mentioned that he visited few nights over there, and he saw a lot of the activities of the people. Large number of Rohingya are being exported to different countries by the private organizations, to Dubai, to Malaysia, to other Middle East countries, to work as a
midwife or the house work for all this. It is the prestige of the country because they are bearing the Bangladesh passport. So think we are as a leading country as being an exporter of the people, we feel ashamed that how the Bangladesh nationals has come all these places, Qatar, Middle East and so on. So these things are the concern of the business community, and I hope the nations will take care of these. For the small particular issue, we cannot be disturbed, image should not be damaged. And the Rohingyas, they are basically, I have seen the Second Great War. And from that very day, we used to know Rohingyas are already posted there. And Rohingyas were once, I think, ruled by the one king called the same my name, Abul Qasim Raja. And Abul Qasim Raja has ruled for a long time during Pakistan time. He was fighting with both Pakistan army and the Burmese. Gradually he was caught, he was killed, and that area was remained within the Rohingya areas comfortably with Burmese. And their main job was to export rice to Bangladesh. Both sides were happy because we need to have a food crisis at that time. Today, people are saying they are not Bangladesh nationals. In last 70 years, we know they were Rohingyas with the right one, straight, and they have the separate identity, and they should get the separate passport for their own, nationality. As such, I feel the world should understand that this is not the Bangladeshis are over there. This is the different state people have come to our country, and they must come forward to solve our problems. We need to deal with the crisis and all the rehabilitation program, but we should strive for a lasting and peaceful solution which will not worsen their lives further. This was very nicely mentioned in our main keynote speaker in the morning, that he has given 7 points that for the security of the Rohingya peoples, world must take care of these few points. Hope our policymakers of United Nations and the big powers would give necessary attention on this crisis. We need to deal this problem prudently. Further delay may lead to the negative consequences in the particular area, and gradually it will be in the Southeast Asia. So with these few words, I say thank you very much for giving me patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing your concern, and thanks for your valuable speech. Now I'd like to request the Chairman, Board of Trustees of North-South University, Mr. Benazir Ahmed, to deliver his speech.
Good afternoon to everybody. Honorable Chairperson, distinguished speakers, Excellencies, faculty members, delegates, and my dear students. I'd like to offer my special thanks to North-South University Institute for South Asian Policy and Governance and UNHCR for organizing such a important international conference. Rohingya crisis in Bangladesh, challenges and sustainable solution. I think these topics and this problem is not made by Bangladesh, and this is not only the issue of Bangladesh. It is an issue of international issue. Bangladesh government on humanitarian ground may consider to interact the refugees, but it cannot be a longer time, and Bangladesh cannot bear that for a long time. I was with our Honorable Prime Minister to 72nd and 73rd UN General Assembly in New York, UN headquarters. In September 17,
she placed his demand to the international community. At the same time, in September 18, she placed some more solution. I think if the international community considered this, we can resolve this issue shortly. Excellency, as one of our speaker mentioned, we got the support from your government, US government. We believe US is always supporting our activities, and we are with our US for our economic and political ties. I would request you, please give us your support, and at the same time seek support from other communities so that we can resolve this issue shortly. And this 2 days conference obviously will find out some solution, recommendations, and I would request the world community to consider the same and to resolve this issue shortly. I will not prolong my deliberation. I have my deliberation in the morning session. Maybe tomorrow in the closing I will say something more. Thank you so much for your kind presence. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very brief speech. Now I'd like to request His Excellency Mr. R. Miller, U.S. Ambassador to Bangladesh, to deliver his speech.
Assalamu alaikum. I think I'm the last speaker today, correct? So I'll try and keep my remarks very brief. Because everything that I'd hoped to say just in the short hour I've been here has been said and expressed much better than I can do. For the students who are here, you're among real heroes and heroines. You have some extraordinary people here doing extraordinary work. You have an international woman of courage. You have people on stage who have been addressing this issue since long before August of 2017. Some of the folks in this room, when I see them in Cox's Bazar, they're covered head to foot in mud and sweat and doing what they're doing, saving lives with no complaint. And it's the very best of all of us. And it's moving to be here among you, and I feel humbled and quite small, actually. I'm proud to work with the government and people of Bangladesh. You've heard me say it many times before, who have opened their hearts and borders to 1 million persecuted human beings, our brothers and sisters. Proud to work with the international community on this enormous humanitarian effort, the savior of untold thousands and thousands and thousands of lives. Someone mentioned about an hour ago that the solution to this problem is not money and resources, it's political will. And there's a great deal of truth to that, but money and resources help too, don't they? And I'm also proud to say the United States is the leading contributor of humanitarian assistance in response to the Rohingya crisis. Through the generosity of the American taxpayer, the United States has provided $542 million since the escalation of violence in August of 2017, including $464 million for programs inside Bangladesh. And as I'm sure you've heard over and over again today, not just for Rohingya, but for the host communities that are sharing this incredible burden. In 2019 alone, the United States contributed over $118 million to Rohingya and host communities in Bangladesh. This includes $45.5 million I announced on March 3rd for the UN World Food Program, and on February 15th, the U.S. announced $60 million to the United Nations Commissioner for Refugees, International Organization for Migration, and the United Nations Children's Fund. We continue to call on others, to call on all countries, to join us in contributing to this humanitarian response. The 1 million Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh make up part of the 68.5 million people who are displaced worldwide, including more than 28 million refugees and asylum seekers. The majority of these displaced people were forced to flee their homes due to violence, armed conflict, and/or fear of persecution. And again, I'm proud to say the United States is there to help. We are the largest single provider of humanitarian assistance worldwide, and that's more than $8 billion in 2018. And our goal is to alleviate, along with all of you, lives, to alleviate suffering, save lives, ensure vulnerable people receive life-saving assistance and protection as close to their homes as possible. And by working with key partners and many of the people in this room, we're doing just that, providing urgent life-saving support. And besides the Rohingya refugee crisis, of course, we're all working together on large-scale humanitarian crises in Venezuela, Syria, South Sudan, among others. I'm going to cut my other remarks short about all the different programs that we have, all the great work we're doing. You've heard about those today. But it's really important, I know you've heard it a number of times, but let me just reiterate the fact that this crisis, you hear about donor fatigue and compassion fatigue. We cannot let that happen. And if you get that sense that's happening within your own soul, you need to go to Cox's Bazar and look in the eyes of the people who are in those camps, and look in the eyes of the people in the host communities who are impacted by this humanitarian calamity. You know the challenges, sustainable solutions. You've heard many of those today. The solution, for the most part, resides in Myanmar. And the United States will continue to put pressure on Myanmar to come up with a solution where the people who have been so cruelly displaced can return to their places of origin. And we all have to work together as a global community to ensure that happens. The Rohingya want to return to their homes in Myanmar. We support the safe, dignified, sustainable, voluntary repatriation of the Rohingya. The United States remains concerned the government of Myanmar has not taken the appropriate actions to hold accountable those responsible for human rights violations and abuses. And on July 16th, the U.S. Secretary of State designated 4 Myanmar military officials for their roles in gross human rights violations in Rakhine State. These individuals and their immediate family members are ineligible for entry into the United States. And with this announcement, the United States is the first government to publicly take action with respect to the most senior leadership of the Myanmar military. And these designations are in addition to sanctions against Myanmar military and border guard police, as well as 2 military units for their involvement in ethnic cleansing in Rakhine State and other human rights abuses in Kachin and Shan states. These latest, thank you. It's just one step, it's just a building block, but these latest designations send a message, and we hope a strong message, to Myanmar officials, should they commit atrocities and other serious human rights abuses and continue to do so, there will be consequences under U.S. law. We can't allow what happened to the Rohingya to stand. What message does it send if we allow this to stand? What message does it send around the world? The United States is focused on policies that will change behavior and promote accountability. We believe this latest action is one step toward achieving these goals. We continue to call on the government of Myanmar to fully implement the Annan Commission recommendations and others and offer our help in doing so. We continue to call on Myanmar to create conditions on the ground conducive for the safe return of Rohingya, and we continue to press for the establishment of civilian control of the military, justice for victims of horrific human rights abuses, and accountability for all those responsible. Again, I just want, particularly the students in this room, you heard it before. One of the speakers said that this issue is not going to be solved simply by governments and international organizations. It's going to be solved by people getting engaged, people around the world, and certainly young people around the world. And I encourage you to take inspiration from what you've heard today and roll up your sleeves and become involved. There's nothing I've done in 32 years as a public servant, as a U.S. diplomat, that makes me feel prouder than to be associated with this life-saving effort. And again, I'm moved and I'm humbled when I go and see people in the field doing the great work that you're doing. Bangladesh, you should be very, very proud. of what you've done. And the last time I was in Cox's Bazar, I met with a group of Rohingya leaders, and I said this, and I want you to keep me honest on it. I said, you will not be forgotten. You are not forgotten. And as long as I'm here as U.S. Ambassador, that will certainly be the case. Thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency Mr. Miller, for taking the trouble to come here and spend time with us, and for your very thought-provoking speech. Thank you very much for that. Now it's time to hear from our session chair, and our session chair is Mr. Muhammad Shahidul Haq. We have already heard from him in the previous session. Now it's time again to hear from him as the concluding remarks. Mr. Muhammad Shahidul Haq, Senior Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Government of Bangladesh.
Thank you. I'm sure that by now you're bored listening to me. So I'll try and be as brief as possible. Distinguished friends and colleagues sitting on the podium, there are a couple of questions thrown at me in the last session which I did not answer. So I thought that I'll focus on that rather than sharing my own thoughts. One issue came out repeatedly is the security and stability issue. Of course, when 1 million people walked into your territory, there are reasons to be alarmed in terms of stability and security. I think we have managed that quite well. One thing I often say, and I mentioned it when I was in the UN parlor, that think of a scenario replicating Europe, that these people comes in and Bangladesh provides protection, food, and say that, please continue to walk and find your home. What would happen? The whole South Asia would have been destabilized. So Bangladesh has done a big favor to the international community by stabilizing this moving population in Cox's Bazar, and continue to do that. As of now, we can also inspire them to move on all directions, right? South and Southeast Asia. Think of that. So that's what we did in terms of security and stability. I would like to warn you that security is certainly a big issue. We are attaching due importance to this, but for heaven's sake, do not securitize this Rohingya issue. That will be the big disfavor to this community. I hope you understand what is the difference between securitizing a moving population. There are examples all around the world right now. I'll not go into that direction. And what it means to stabilize and bring in law and order on the moving population. Now, in doing this, we have also had our own struggle, and I would like to share with you, especially with our young colleagues. There are two issues which continue to haunt policymakers and civil servants all over the world dealing with these kinds of forced population. One is the national interest. You are supposed to ensure, die for your national interest. That's what the civil servants are all about, including the foreign service officials. On the other hand, how about your international obligations? So, continuous juggling between national interest and your international obligations, which is called, in this case, humanity. And where is the tricky balance between the two? Do you absolutely forget about your international interest and uphold international obligations, or vice versa? So that continues to haunt us. We have so far, under the leadership of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, drawn a balance. And that is why when we were inviting ICC and ICJ, we struggled that how that will have an impact in long run on the Bangladesh's national interest. And I can tell you that there will be repercussions, there will be impact for Bangladesh to going into the accountability area, and the nation possibly will have to take the cost. But we thought that that is the best possible way, we can move on. So I would like you to also be aware of it, think of it, that when we say things which need to be said and when we do not say, which need not to be said. But this balancing is a huge issue. There are countries which has absolutely tilted this balance. There are countries which still keeping the balance. Look at Germany, Sweden, and other countries. There's another question, that are we making business out of it? This is exactly the narrative which Myanmar is propagating. You'd be surprised that they're circulating note verbals, very formal way of communicating diplomatically, saying that Bangladesh do not want these Rohingyas to leave because they are making money out of it. Of course not. We are paying heavily, not only in terms of 6,000 acres of land, forest land, but also, when World Food Program last year, possibly no one knows, were facing huge problem in terms of feeding them. Bangladesh government gave them 20,000 metric ton of rice to be distributed among the Rohingyas. Just to give you one example, that how much we are paying, including our monetary costs. So please do not buy this. We have no intention of making this as a business venture. We have deliberately avoided any proposal coming from anywhere to make it as a business venture. In fact, some of the academicians and some of the international organizations did come out with a very thought-provoking presentation, which was shared with us, where he said, why don't you take these people and we'll give you this much of money. And here is a gentleman sitting here, who had the guts, or director, why don't you stand up? Stand up. Give him a. And I used this gentleman had the guts, sitting in the ministerial meeting, said that we will give you the double, take this Rohingyas to your country. So there was no answer to this. So we have no intention of creating a business opportunity out of a humanitarian and geopolitical crisis. We want these people safely to be back to their own country. That set of questions came in. What is the end game? I don't know whether the gentleman is still around or not. What is the end game? I don't know end game. We don't know end game. In politics, in international relations, there's nothing called end game, but there's a continuous game that is being played. And in this continuous game, what you have to do is you have to sustain. And you can only sustain as a government when your people are with you. If your people are not with you, in these kinds of a geopolitical game, you just cannot sustain in long run. So please, I think this kind of a exercise, this kind of discussions are very useful for us to continue to be reassured that whatever we are playing in the national interest. Return is integral component of the Rohingya issue. We are not looking at local integration. In fact, this is what the other narrative coming out of Myanmar. We have also friends in Myanmar with whom we have served since our younger days. And they said, you are 162 billion people. Why can't you take 1 more million people? And then we are very good friends. We don't have to do all kinds of these things. He said, of course, that's what your long-term gain is. That is what the Myanmar wants. Don't buy those narratives. Do not propagate those narratives. It's a question of humanitarian. It's a question of genocide. With whom you can't do business, you can't compromise. If you do it, they'll do it with many more nations and states and the ethnic communities. Now, last question, I will not take your time. What do you do now with these kinds of a multidimensional complex problem which is mixed of human rights, humanitarian, and geopolitics? What you do with it? For us, it's a nightmare, absolute nightmare. For us, those who negotiate with Myanmar officials day after day, it's a nightmare. We have sleepless night. Even when we go there, we have hesitation to eating their food because we don't know what they want to do with us. So this is where the nation is. And these negotiations are one of the toughest. One of the most funny things, I can spend hours after hours, and some of my colleagues are sitting here. Why don't our colleagues, those who deal with it, stand up? Let them see what you do. Come on, Firdausi. These are some of our colleagues. Give them a big hand. These are the people who continue to fight for your interest. They often risk their own life negotiating because the other side thinks if one of this person disappears, possibly the negotiation will be easier. But they have seen one after another coming in and bring the same kind of an argument. The most important thing is that, when we sit down and talk to Myanmar officials, they agree on everything, every possible thing that we ask. But the moment we land up in Dhaka for official communication, they said, we can't agree with this. We can't agree with that. Our generals are not agreeing. Our government is not agreeing. And we come back to point zero. This is what we are faced with. I went to the Security Council in last March and told that we are not only unhappy, we are disappointed with the Security Council because they have utterly failed us in dealing with one of the most unstable phenomena of South Asia. So we are currently taking an approach, and these are also strategic thinking. We are continuing our bilateral approach. Some often criticize us that why are we keeping our bilateral windows open? State cannot stop talking to a state. During the most difficult period of Second World War, Germany was talking to Britain, Britain was talking to Italy. That is what diplomacy is all about. You have to continue to talk. Keep your bilateral option open. But there we don't stop. We are also talking the regional power. You'll be very happy to learn, and I have been privy to those discussions for the last 7 years, where our Prime Minister very strongly lobbied with regional powers that you have to do something with the Rohingya population in terms of returning them to their homeland. If you don't do it, tomorrow it will haunt you. It will destabilize the region. It will destabilize Asia. The price will be very costly and dear. But, as I said earlier session, we continue to also remain globally active. This is a major shift. Somebody was asking what is the shift in the foreign policy of Bangladesh. This is the shift. For 20 years we did not multilateralize this issue. But in 2017 we took it to the multilateral forum. Not only that, every time Human Rights Council took up Myanmar case, we at their earnest request for years after years hold their hand, saying that we are neighbors. We are geographically together. So we'll have to hold each other's hands and help. We said enough is enough. Now we not only left their hand, we have also mobilized resources and countries to bring in strongest possible resolution against Myanmar. This is a major shift in our policy. We are fighting on the rights forum with our neighbor who will remain neighbor for the rest of our life. This is the major shift that you are seeing. So much so that we had to open a humanitarian wing in the Foreign Office to deal with only Rohingya issues. But at the end, why we do it? We do it for humanity. We do it for ourselves. It might happen tomorrow with us, as it has happened in 1971 with us. At that time, we'll have to have friends. And if we do not set examples, no one else will set example for you. I'm extremely happy and delighted to see so many young colleagues continue to remain after so much of a torture today in terms of listening, but it's worth. Hang on. We will set a global example in terms of Bengali nationhood. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. You do understand that how much our students, they are appreciating the statement of our Foreign Secretary. So I do understand this is becoming a very, very long day, but we have finished most of the serious business till now. Our students have done some wonderful job. They have prepared a photography exhibition at the exhibition hall of NSU, and also they collected 40 paintings which have been painted by Rohingya children, which are also been displayed there. Other than that, they also organized very small, a kind of a solidarity cultural program for Rohingya for only 30 minutes. So I would request you that if you can just hold some patience till now and wait for we need 10 to 15 minutes to prepare the stage, and we'll do a very quick cultural program in line with this whole solidarity with Rohingya people, and then probably we'll go for dinner, which will start at 7:30. So I would request all our participants to be seated, and request our panelists here to, if you just can take the seat. The audience will take just 10-15 minutes, and then the cultural program will start. Thank you very much. I again request the students and others, please be seated. We'll just take 10 to 15 minutes to prepare the dais. So volunteers, can you do it very quickly? Prepare the dais as quickly as possible.